Hello and welcome to Specialist Lending Solutions TV in partnership with Castle Trust Bank. I'm Shakina Sawahena, Commercial Editor at Mortgage Solutions in SLS. Today I'm joined by Robert Oliver, Director of Sales at Castle Trust Bank, Anthony Rose, Director at LDN Finance, Chris Corns, Operations Director at Crystal Specialist Finance, and Richard Merritt, Head of Strategic Development at Simply Biz Mortgages. Thank you all for joining me. As the sector becomes more professionalised and opportunities grow, buy-to-let investors are looking at new areas of the market to invest in. Rob, where would you say you're seeing the biggest signs of diversification in the buy-to-let market?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot more HMO inquiries coming through over the last quarter. Now, we're seeing investors very comfortable in this type of purchase because they offer good yields, but we're also picking up quite a bit of feedback to say it's reducing risk, i.e. if you've got tenants in a HMO property and one tenant leaves, you've still got four of the two actually paying rent. So from that perspective, it de-risks the actual purchase. Obviously, location and demand are really important, and some licenses to convert are taking a lot longer than they've done previously. And I think lenders have got to take a pragmatic approach around how you can actually conduct those transactions. But we're seeing a lot of people picking up these type of properties in the smaller university towns, smaller cities, moving away from the traditional hotspots of HMOs to try and develop this market. And we're seeing yields of up to 9.6, 9.7%. And I think on a recent survey, Cardiff came out as probably one of the hotspots for HMO lending. So I think we're seeing more people move away from the more traditional type HMO locations and try and develop new areas of the market. And I think around the student let tends to work quite nicely, particularly as the universities are taking students back again.
And Anthony, what about you?
I think the biggest influx of new business that we've seen since the start of the pandemic, and to be honest, a tiny bit before, is on the holiday let side. So I think with the demographic of us being a London-based firm, we've seen lots of clients who are in a position that they want to take money out of existing main residence, use that as deposit, and then go off and purchase a holiday property. And I think what's been interesting is that I think it's really split the consumers as to what the ultimate use of that property is. So it could be a professional investor who maybe has a few holiday lets already and is adding to a portfolio, or we've seen a lot of sort of mixed use of people wanting to use the property themselves a large amount of the time and then maybe Airbnb it or holiday let it at other times, or exclusive for family use with no intention to let it whatsoever. So I think that's been the sort of biggest change in the market that we've seen and been very, very profitable for us. And I think it's been interesting to see how quickly the lenders responded to it in each of those different types of markets. So lenders that are doing it on a residential basis and happy to be let out for 90 days a year, whatever the criteria may be for the lender, all the way through to the sort of more professional holiday let market exclusively for holiday let. So I think it's been a really interesting change that's come about during the pandemic.
And Richard, where are you noticing any changes in diversification?
Well, firstly, I would wholeheartedly agree with both what Rob and Anthony have said. And Rob alluded to it with HMOs, but we've seen an increasing trend for geographical diversity, particularly around looking for value. There's been a lot of pent-up demand in the market for the period of time leading into COVID, and obviously the market's been extremely buoyant during and hopefully now post-COVID. But that really has then seen investors look for better ways for value creation, and therefore some of the areas that are perceived to be maybe slightly overpriced, they're looking at maybe diversifying from a geographical perspective to get access to better yielding properties and places where they might not have to pay quite so over the odds.
And Chris, the same to you. Where are you seeing diversification?
I think everything that the guys have said earlier is replicated here as well. To add to that, I'd say semi-commercial is a real growth area. Something that Rob touched on at the start was investors de-risking their portfolios. And one of the big growth areas that we're seeing is in that semi-commercial space. So if you take typically a retail unit on the ground floor with a number of apartments above, your normal buy-to-let investor is comfortable with those flats, those apartments. add in that commercial element and it suddenly de-risks that portfolio. You could be receiving 18, 20, 30,000 pound a year rent from that unit with a longer rental period, maybe a 5-year or 10-year fully repairing lease as well.
And in your opinion, Chris, which parts of the sector seem to be most lucrative right now? The ones you mentioned, or are you seeing more opportunities elsewhere?
Semi-commercial again is a really lucrative space, especially if you can take, rather than the tenant changing every 6 months or so, if that commercial tenant's there for 5 years, generating a good rental income, you've got some really lucrative returns coming in there. But also to add to that, conversions. So if you do have that unit, maybe the tenant has gone out of business on the ground floor, it's relatively easy to get planning permission on some of these now, so you can convert that into something else and really add the value there.
And Richard, the same to you. What areas would you say are lucrative right now?
Well, I think Anthony's really just touched on it with holiday lets. Massive area of opportunity. It's a very specialist area because there's a range of different options. And if you look at consumer behaviour, their immediate requirement around a holiday let is to let through Airbnb. It's the most prominent brand in the sector, but actually wading through the lending options that will provide a solution to the customer can be quite tough. So it's very much an area where they will need to take intermediated advice to be able to find an appropriate solution.
And Anthony, what are your views on this?
Yeah, I mean, to echo what Richard just said, I think the holiday let market is very lucrative, both from a broker's perspective and obviously the industry at large from a revenue generation, but also as an area that the consumer, the clients have been looking at.
And Rob, the same to you. What areas of the market are you seeing as the most lucrative?
So I think we agree with the guys that the holiday let market is probably the one we've seen boom most. And I suppose it always comes with a little bit of a warning because we deal with a lot of first-time landlords, which is great, but Richard's point around the intermediated advice that you need to receive, it's also the advice that sits around the whole transaction. So if you're buying a holiday let, the market is probably quite flooded at the moment with people investing. You've got to decide which type of the market you want to go into, how you're going to actually advertise yourself to that market, but also it's understanding the difference between a holiday let and a buy-to-let.
So holiday let seems to be the area to keep an eye on. Well, thank you very much for your answers. That is all we have time for at the moment. Thank you all for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the discussion and see you next time.